you see where I'm going with this one. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man.
Oh, your booty looking nice. Like, yo, can you like shake it?
No, I don't shake no asshole here. Hey, yep.
The name that's just as nice when you say it thrice. What makes an adaptation of a beloved IP like Spider-Man so good to so many? What makes an adaptation passable? And what makes an adaptation stinky doo-doo butt cheeks? Some would consider these questions to be infinitely open-ended, especially when it comes to a character with as much pedigree as Spider D. Mansworth Rothschild III, the old money of the comic book adaptation world. And as fans of this character, we've been eating good with Spider-Verse and the new Insomniac game releasing back-to-back. There's truly never been a better time to be a card-carrying member of the Spider-Man stan community. No comic book character since Superman and Batman combined have seen as many adaptations as our boy Spidey.
And it's Spider-Man, not Spidey.
I'm pretty sure I've heard people call you Spidey.
Yeah, close friends.
Excuse me, Spider-Man. My point being, not as many characters have seen nearly as many revampings, conversions, and modifications as this one, and across so many mediums. So what I'm here to do is discuss and point out some of what I consider to be the best Spider-Man adaptations this side of the Mississippi. From games to movies to television, I will be pointing out my choices for the best adaptations from their respective mediums, with a few honorable mentions littered throughout each. Now, I'm fully aware of the fact that some of the objective best versions of the stories surrounding this character are in graphic novel and comic form, but, you know, I'm kind of a novice in the comic world. So, anyways, get settled and keep your eyes peeled as we search for the ultimate Spider-Man adaptation. So as we all know, there's an Alexandria-sized library of Spider-Man games, so I'm sorry if I don't touch on your favorite, but you have to understand, it's just business. I'm going to do honorable mentions and then cut to my interpretation of the best adaptation. This goes for the two other mediums as well. Without further ado, let's get into the honorable mentions. The first shout out goes to Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. Now, I know this one doesn't have much in the way of swinging mechanics or an open world, but what it lacks in both it more than makes up for in areas like combat, world building, and overall variety of playstyle. This game was for me, and I'm sure many others, the first taste of what we would come to know as the Spider-Verse. I hadn't seen the 90s show yet, but by the time I was sentient, the show only came out in reruns, and keeping up with cable releases back then was a pain in the ass. But I digress. We get 4 Spider-Men to switch between in this one. The OG, Noir, Ultimate Universe in 2099.
All that matters now is that you watermelon-eating, chicken bone-sucking, grape juice-drinking, cotton-picking, basketball-playing,
better known to us as Miguel. We go through each level switching off between the aforementioned heroes. Each spider comes with their own moveset and aesthetic, special abilities. Miguel is the objective best in my opinion. Ultimate is a trailing second. With each world comes a different rendition of the many characters, littered throughout each of the Spider-Man Rogues galleries. Spider-Man Noir has the coolest villain renditions. There's always an eerie creepiness and sinister nature to them. Made feeling as Noir feel like a Batman Gotham by Gaslight Spider-Man crossover. The Deadpool level was also pretty sick. Ultimate Spidey always kind of finds a way to sneak in there. He's pretty solid. The main antagonist of this whole shebang is Mysterio, which I thought was pretty cool. I feel like he doesn't really show up a lot across Spider-Man media, so it's always nice to see him as the front runner every once in a blue moon. His scheme and the plot surrounding it are very basic as far as superhero storytelling goes. I don't really think this game needed one anyways. The concept is more than enough to get people involved, enough to see it through to the end. Solid Spider-Man game. 3.5 Shattered Dimensions out of 4. The next honorable mention is Spider-Man, Web of Shadows. Now I'm going to keep it a stack with you all, and admit that I've never beaten Web of Shadows personally. I used to play it with my cousin in my younger days, and got maybe 10 hours out of it. The reason I bring it up is because I believe it's one of the more important and meme-worthy legacies compared to its contemporaries. Web of Shadows also has one of the most innovative and boundary-pushing Spider-Man mechanics in any game featuring the character to this day. The air combat and web swinging and wall crawling mechanics have a super stylish, hyper-acrobatic flow to them, almost Devil May Cry-esque. while transitioning almost seamlessly between each other. One of the only Spider-Man games where the wall crawling isn't like an afterthought. It has been a notoriously mediocre or downright terribly realized mechanic across a ton of titles in the character's gaming history. If the original Spider-Man 2 set the standard for web swinging, Web Shadow set the standard for wall crawling and midair mechanics. It is a true pioneer and it deserves its place in the historical archives. And now for what I consider to be the pinnacle of Spider adaptations within the medium of video games. Drumroll please. The Ultimate Spider-Man. Is anyone surprised? I'm not. This one is the best, and that's not just my nostalgia goggles fogging up. Now I know what you want to say. Indifferent, why wouldn't you choose one of the most recent and objective best Spider-Man games put out by Sony? To which I'd respond, what is that accent? Scottish? And also, of course I'm not including recent Sony games. They're too good and too obvious. You may or may not be aware of the fact that before 2016, the Spider-Man adaptation you got in any medium was just what you got. The adaptation that would largely define the character for the next 2 to 4 years in the zeitgeist. Things are different now. The general Spider public was broken into factions before Sony refined the Spider-Man formula down to its most delicious components, and using that formula to make Spider-Verse in the Insomniac games. It's not fair. I'm sorry, dude. That being said, don't expect Spider-Verse in the movie portion either, because it's too good for its own good. Anyways, Ultimate Spider-Man for GameCube, that's what I played it on, was my first real introduction to the Ultimate continuity. This game was super bold for just beginning in the middle of the Ultimate run, panel for panel. It's a strategy that I think ultimately paid off because it probably got thousands of people to read the Bendis run. On top of that, it's a game that manages to make you care about the symbiote story without relying on you eventually getting to play as Black Spider-Man, because it gives you something way cooler in return. The exchange being that you get to play as Venom for like 50% of the entire game, as well as being able to switch between him and Peter whenever you want after you beat the main game. Even in the newest Spider-Man game, spoilers ahead, while it does let you play as Venom, it's only for a couple of like linear segments. And you know what the funny part is? The mechanic for that Venom section feels extremely reminiscent of the one in Ultimate. It's basically an updated version.
He copied my whole fucking flow! Word for word, bar for bar!
Honestly, even those stories in these two games feel like an alternate version of one another. All that to say that playing as a character other than Spider-Man in a Spider-Man game is almost exclusive to Ultimate. I say almost because I think the original Spider-Man 1 or 2 you can play as like the Green Goblin, which if that's true is something I 100% have to experience.
Who are you? The Emerald Elf?
Fuck you, Spider-Man!
The Ultimate Universe is also such an interesting version of Peter. He's the most prominent version of the character besides the good old 616. Like, if we're talking Hall of Famers, this is a Hall of Famer. The game itself is framed like a comic book as well, with scenes transitioning between panels and characters literally jumping out of the page to move to other places in the story. For a game that's less than a gigabyte of data, it has got so much packed into it, and I didn't even get to mention the multiple other Marvel characters littered throughout this adventure. When you ask me which game is the best, I will always say Ultimate. It just has too much going on for it. Solid gameplay mechanics, a banger of a story, timeless cel-shaded graphics, Marvel cameos, and you get to play as Venom for half of it, including boss fights. A game truly deserving of the Ultimate title. My only gripe being the Ultimate costumes. There aren't really a lot of them, none of them are really good except for the black one, and they're all a kick in the fucking nuts to unlock. So unfortunately it can't all be perfect, which is why I say Spider-Man PS1 is the gold standard for costume unlocks, though we wouldn't see a costume system as good for another 18 years. Let's be grateful the dog days are behind us. At least they were until people started to come full circle and we would end up with too many Spider-Man costumes. Now, Marvel's animation catalog, much like Marvel as a whole, is carried by Spider-Man content. Yes, from the iconic 1960s iteration all the way to the most recent adaptation, starring Marvel's twinkiest Spider-Man to date. It is a medium just as rich and just as dense as its movie and video game counterparts, so in recognition of that, I'm going to try to keep it brief with the honorable mentions. Starting us off is a beloved classic, something that is, for so many, the first real introduction to the Spider-Man mythos, because before we had the Raimi trilogy, we had Spider-Man, the animated series. Quick side thought, every character deserves the animated series treatment. Both Batman and Spider-Man have shows with that tagline and serve as some of the most faithful adaptations and recognizable adaptations of each character. The same can also be said for Superman. I don't know, it just seems to work when it happens, if you get what I'm saying. Anyways, we already know why the series is great, especially if you've seen it from beginning to end. It has legendary voice acting.
Shut
chase you to the ends of the earth!
A sick-ass rogues gallery, and some pretty cool storytelling if you ask me. Like, if you don't feel like you know enough about the character because you don't keep up with media or read comic source material, watch this show from beginning to end and you will be a card-carrying Spider-Man historian afterwards. The next shout-out goes to somewhat of a controversial pick, and that is the Ultimate Spider-Man. I know, but just please hear me out.
You need to leave! That is disgusting.
Let's try to keep it civil, people. I think Ultimate has a decent amount going for it. I'd even say Ultimate does the best, in some categories, of expanding on the groundwork laid out by the animated series. You can tell the people working on Ultimate held a lot of reverence for the 94 show and wanted to recreate that experience for a newer generation. While 94 had us going along with a more 616-esque interpretation with some crossovers, your Daredevils, your X-Men, and even the occasional Blade and Morbius. There were even some multiversal hijinks a couple of times in 94. It really is the blueprint, but Ultimate just takes all that and really runs with it, presenting more of a 19999 style universe where Spider-Man joins S.H.I.E.L.D. and wants to hang out with the Avengers. Dude even goes to school with like Luke Cage and Iron Fist. It's a real free-for-all. Not to mention the multiverse saga in the show, which spans a couple of seasons, I believe, allowing us to interact with other versions of Spider-Man for extended periods of time. It tries to be fun and often succeeds. You can't take that away from it. I think the main gripe people have with it is that it's like Lizzie McGuire but with Spider-Man, which really is only a problem if you don't like Lizzie McGuire, which I do so. Now what if I told you there's a show that doesn't have any of that fancy multiversal hoo-ha and still manages to surpass both Ultimate and 94 by a country mile? You'd probably believe me because you were watching cartoons in 2008 or saw a better YouTube video than this one about it. A show not about just any old Spider-Man, but the spectacular Spider-Man. Yes, I saw it coming, you saw it coming. Your neighbor Giuseppe, who makes that delicious carbonara at the church potluck, even saw it coming. The show is a treasure, and it is nothing short of a miracle that it existed in the first place. The show was unfortunate enough to be acquired at the beginning of Disney's acquisition of various Marvel IPs. Spectacular was the unfortunate middle child of this merger, and while it would see 2 spectacular seasons, Disney would take it behind the barn and shoot it like Old Yeller. Luckily for us, the team behind Spectacular would only need 2 seasons to cook up their own masterpiece, with tight, engaging storylines, dynamic fight sequences, and a colorful cast of classic Spider-Man characters, most, if not all of whom are fleshed out in the 3rd degree. Also probably the best black suit arc across all mediums, with Tobey as a close second of course. Also, the Sinister Six scrap goes so hard in this show, and my guy was not even awake for it! It's not hard to see why Spectacular maintains its GOAT status in perpetuity, and probably won't be passed up until it hopefully gets a reboot, and then we will be the ones who get the last laugh. What is that? Now, I'm sure for many of you this is a very contentious subject among your peers. A subject so polarizing it has caused a chasm within the casual Spider-Man fanbase and the greater Marvel enjoyer community as a whole. Who is your favorite live-action Spider-Man? Is it the classic and dependable everyman Tobey?
Punch me, I bleed.
The debonair and daring Andrew?
That's a question.
The charismatic and endearing Tom? Or perhaps you fancy yourself a Shinji Toto stan. Whatever your flavor, there's a bit of something for everyone out there. For this category, I'm gonna have my 3 Spider-Men going in order of least enjoyed to most enjoyed, with my favorite from each movie series. With that out of the way, let's hop right on in. And what better way to start something off than with a homecoming? A Spider-Man homecoming, that is. Yes, that's right, Tom Holland is technically my least favorite live-action Spidey. Save your hate for the comment section, please. You'd understand my choices better if you knew how old I was. But suffice to say, I was a little bit older by the time Tom hit the scene. I was already seasoned with 2 Spider-Men preceding him, and wasn't in a position to be easily impressed by the new kid. That said, Tom Holland has really grown on me, especially after No Way Home, but I didn't always feel this way about him. For a while, I would only refer to him as Iron Man Jr. I didn't like the kid. He felt like Peter Parker with a sugar daddy, which didn't leave a pleasant taste in my mouth at first. But like many others, I learned to grow up and accept this new adaptation for what it was. A new adaptation. It's not Tom's fault that Andrew's run was cut short, and I'll admit on some level, I felt like it was his fault and we wouldn't get an amazing 3, which I now recognize as the spiteful conniptions of a betrayed teenager. But yeah, Homecoming is pretty good. It has some really intense emotional scenes and slick action while still maintaining a certain funny lightheartedness throughout the flick, and not in an annoying, jilted way, like a lot of other MCU properties. Looking at you, Civil War.
We're still friends, right?
Depends on how hard you hit me.
Oh, you know I can't stay mad at you, sweetie. Also, Insomniac, I get it. Tom is our most recent live action, but that doesn't mean he needs 8 suits in Spider-Man 2. Andrew and Tobey have 4 in total between them, 2 each, and Tom has fucking 8! What are we doing? Not Insomniac's best year for suits. Stop putting it on the screen. Next up is who many consider the OG, and while he is pretty good, I do think a lot of people look at him with their rose tints on. Does that mean these movies didn't set the standard for what we would come to know as a superhero blockbuster? Definitely not. The Elfman intros alone give it legendary status. You know who he is, the master of meek himself. Tobey Maguire, America's original sweetheart. Just look at that face. Now, the best thing about these movies is that they're simple. They tell you the origin story, show you Peter eating shit, and send you right out the door in the next adventure. Among these 3 adventures, however, I have always found the 3rd installment the most engaging and exciting. You can shout from the rooftops all day that 2 is the best thing to happen to film since Schindler's List, but you'll never convince me that anything in this movie even comes close to this scene right here. The best thing about 2 is definitely the train scene. It's the sequence most people probably think of when they think Spider-Man 2. Aside from the fact that it obviously isn't nearly as ambitious or as memorable as 3, the first black suit scenes alone are some of the coldest in cinema. Also, Eric Foreman as Venom? That's just so much fun in the stupidest way. I like to believe there's a reality where like him and Tom Hardy switch movies. Finally, the last stop on what has been a nostalgic journey through the web of our collective Spider memories, so to speak, and what better place to land on than my most cherished entry, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This movie, for me, and I'm certain many others, is a movie that came out at a perfect time in your life. I was only 16, and while I loved what the character had given me over the years, I had never truly felt like I could be the kid behind the mask, in some other universe out there. It wasn't about race, age, or even possibilities contained within reality as we know it. It was about connecting with a character, a story that really made me feel something. And when I was 16, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was that. As you've heard me mention before, I see what people love about the others. Tom has a natural charisma, and Tobey is just so gosh darn endearing. But Andrew has something arguably more special and necessary to the character of Spider-Man, a 3-dimensional quality that allows him to have a certain dichotomy that I've always felt is so intrinsic to the character. In The Amazing Spider-Man 1, the origin story takes a bit of a weird twist where Peter just goes full vigilante and starts assaulting anyone who even remotely looks like Uncle Ben's killer. And while some other video essayists have made valid points, this only goes against the heroic nature of Spider-Man that we've all come to know and love. I'd say that's only looking at half the picture of who this character is supposed to be, because before he was Spider-Man, he was Peter Parker, an underdeveloped, underprivileged, and occasionally edgy teenager, who, when given superhuman abilities, chose to use them for personal gains. Forget him being a teen, most adults would get powers right now and never think twice about using them for purely hedonistic purposes, regardless of who ends up being affected by them. So for Peter to go out and get vengeance for the only father he's ever known, I think is justified. Plus, it makes his realization of what it truly means to wield great power all the sweeter. All that aside, this movie's message is powerful. The message is constant and permeates throughout the entire work. We experience loss, envy, and desperation, only in turn to be uplifted by hope, reassurance, and pure love. I'm not saying a decent amount of dumb shit doesn't happen in this movie, but at its worst, it's balanced out by everything that's good. This movie is still just as powerful to me as it was 10 years ago. Looking back, I don't even care that there isn't a 3rd installment. This clearly didn't need it, but if you need to cope, just tell yourself that No Way Home is the end of the TASM trilogy. I promise you it was the closest thing we'll ever get to one. I promised myself I'd make this one shorter, but I don't know what I expected. The format is just too exciting, so I guess expect this as a series alongside some timeless bangers. I think I'm just gonna call it the ultimate adaptation. That sounds pretty sexy. Overall though, I appreciate this format and how it made me reminisce on some of the most memorable Spider-Man experiences throughout the years, and the crazy thing is, there's still so much I didn't even mention in this video. If you didn't hear your favorites, shout them out in the comments, and maybe let me know why it's your favorite version of the character. Everyone loves a fresh perspective, right? I appreciate whoever out there is watching these things and subscribing. As always, that's just another Indifferent Take. Alright, see you later.
The check's in the mail, baby.